Hello, everyone. This is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about the next few seasons of Road Rules. As I'm recording this, I'm thinking about doing the next four seasons, so season 4 to 7. But by the time I finish all the seasons, this could end up only covering three of the seasons, so season 4 to season 6. But I covered the first three seasons of Road Rules in another video. So if you want to check my raw opinions on those seasons, you can look up the link above and click that video. But yeah, I'm interested in seeing how the show evolves, especially because they are now doing two seasons a year. So clearly it's very popular. Okay, so the fourth season is Road Rules Island. So, just based on this, I'm assuming they're either traveling around one island or they're bouncing from one island to another. So, that will be interesting to see. Looking at the cast, only two out of five of them did a season of the challenge, and the two that did do a challenge season only did one. And from the seasons that I see here, neither one of them were notable on the one season of the challenge that they did. So I'm really entering this season completely blind. I don't really know anyone on the show. So my opinions on them on the season really has no history or context. It's just going to be very blind and raw, which I'm actually very excited about. Okay, so I first want to state that the version of the season that I got was missing two episodes, I'm pretty sure of, so take that in mind when I comment on the season. But Extreme Challenge also missed an episode through every single copy that's on the internet, but people still have commentary on it. Outside of that, yeah, this is easily the worst season of World Rules so far. The fact that only two of the people on this cast did the challenge and they each only did one season should have said it all about how this cast really wasn't that notable. And that's pretty much the case here. I didn't find that they had a whole lot of chemistry. They were not the strongest personalities, and they're definitely very forgettable. I did like the fact that they did travel to island. It made it very unique in that sense. I can definitely tell that the budget rose a bit, but outside of that, it's a very forgettable and unnotable season. Callie leaves her boyfriend, who she has dated or who she's been dating for 5 years. Jake and Vince meet one another to travel to their destination together, and Vince is annoyed with Jake's constant blubbering, and Jake thinks that Vince is a dork. They go to meet Kaylee at a house, then they go to California to meet the remaining two, Oscar and Erica, who are in a cab together. The entire cast are together now, and Michelle from last season welcomes them to the Road Rules family, introduces them to their key for their van, and takes all their stuff. The crew go to their vehicle and they have shirts that hint their first destination. Jake and Vince are now close as their initial conversation was a misunderstanding, and they drive to Mare Island to do paintballing for their first mission and to take the opposing team's flag. The opposing team are prior Road Rulers who are now All Stars, so Christian from season 2, Los from season 1, Timmy and Devin from season 2, Michelle from season 3, and Efrat from season 2. So even just from this list, it definitely seems like season 2 was very popular. The All Stars kick their butts, but they do get money to last a few weeks, and I'm referring to the season forecast, obviously. They are driving to their next location, Treasure Island, but Jake and Kelly are getting pretty close, where it seems like they're working for the police at this moment at their next location. I'm kind of confused about it. Oscar is called out by the group for his attitude and it rubbed the instructor the wrong way, causing him to do like 40 push ups or something. But he gets defensive as hell. Sorry, I got it wrong. I think they are firefighters, and Jake is freaking out about wanting to get off the boat, but the others put away their fear, so they think that it's just ridiculous where he wants to quit already. But of course, he stays. They're doing some drills out on the sea with saving burning boats and saving people, but they pass mission 2. There is some tension between the men and the women due to taking some special flag at the place that they were staying at for mission 2, and we see this feud between Atsuka and Erica rise more and more throughout the episode. They do travel to Erica's home to meet her family, and this triggers Callie because her mother died and she never met her dad, and her stepfather dated someone right after her mother died. So there's a lot going on with her, and she's telling all this to Jake. Oscar and Erica do not get along, and there are a few examples of it throughout the episode, which gets worse with his horrible driving, and she reacts to it. I honestly do not blame her for this one at all. You're not going to play with my life while driving. The house confronts him about his horrible driving, but it's just more Oscar and Erica arguing. So now they're at Balboa Island, and Oscar is being late, as he was running when they needed to take a shower before they. Sorry, he was on a run before he needed to take a shower before they had to go, so that's why there's an issue with time. Pretty much, he's not respecting everyone else's time, so it's an ongoing issue. Jake and Callie and Vince and Erica pair up together, where Oscar's on his own for this next text. But the instructor tells him that Oscar has to join a team since there are only two teams. Oscar is homesick and is cheered up once he's given a letter from his loved ones, which causes him to clean the truck and to make amends with everyone. From what I could grasp, they are creating a skit amongst their teams, but they do complete the third mission. Miami is their next destination, and they're flying down there. The women are bonding about their parents divorcing, but the next task is wing walking. Wait, I'm confused. They're bonding over divorce, but Katie's. I guess maybe her father divorced before she's born. I don't know. That confused me. Anyways, the next task is wing walking as they are one of those miniature cots. Absolutely not. But some. Oh, yes, they have to be on a miniature cot that was like flying, but some others will stand on it while others will fly. We see more bonding of the woman. Kaylee and Jake are getting very, very, very close, where it's clear that something's going to happen, and it is acknowledged that they do have a crush on one another, but she has a boyfriend. Anyways, the mission is complete. Money is a huge issue since the cast are broke and they are struggling to find something to eat. While driving through a fast food area, they essentially crash the top of the ceiling and the police comes, but everything turns out fine. They are working a cab bike job so they can gain money. I've noticed this in prior seasons, but I do like the element of road rules where they have to work these random jobs when they have no money so they can have money to do like the basic necessities. They have plane tickets then to go to the Grand Cayman Islands, and once they arrive, they have to create a swimsuit calendar. Jake wants to get in a relationship with Kelly. She is leaving it open ended despite already having a boyfriend. Of course, they end up successfully completing the mission. Their next task involves harvesting honey from bees' nests, which is obviously going to be a lot of fun. I hope you all caught my sarcasm with that. This task effing sucks, but they do complete it. St. Thomas, I believe, is their next destination, where they are capturing coconuts, seafood, and have to create their own land/setting like they are stranded. They're doing what survivors would be doing in a few years. Overall, they have to survive a deserted island, and Vince is ridiculously sick, but they have been there for 4 days before leaving. The others are talking about Jake and Kelly and whether she actually likes him or just attention, but the two talk about AIDS and is shocked that he tests for it, though he's just taking a safety precaution. The next destination is Puerto Rico, which of course makes Oscar really happy since they're at his turf now. Obviously, he's Puerto Rican. Of course, they go to his family home and everyone meets the family. His friends show up and they catch a lot of interest in Kelly, and Jake makes some comments about them wanting to be some gang member hoodlum Rastafaris from Boca. Um, this could come off as racially insensitive. I just had to put that out there. But Oscar tells his friends to cool off and pretty much takes fine with Oscar checking them. They then have to do a scavenger hunt that involves goats and elves or eggs. My bad, I typed EF as I meant eggs. And then their truck gets stuck for hours, but it is obviously solved. Everyone is still in Puerto Rico, and their next task is about making their own raft to do a race against one another as individuals. Anyways, they are finally leaving Puerto Rico. Actually, we see something a few episodes from now regarding Puerto Rico, but they didn't feel like addressing it here. But we're going to get there when we get there. So, at this point in the episode, we see them leaving Puerto Rico and they're going to Martinique. Erica and Vince are hanging out a lot with one another since they're tired of everyone else, and it's also kind of hinted that they might have a showmance going on throughout the season. But Erica's also in a relationship. We see Erica and Vince pranking one another in their rooms, and it does lighten things up. They are told that they will be spending the next 2 weeks on a boat. Oscar injured his foot while swinging across a boat with his rope, and the cast is traveling to St. Lucia, where the next mission is to help two randoms host a Creole wedding in less than 48 hours. What this means is that they have to find a location, food, music, etc., and a bunch of other stuff to make sure that this wedding happens. And Oscar has to hold back due to his injury, but he gets an ultrasound where it reveals that he has two fractures that will take 2 weeks to recover from. The cast is staying at a hotel, and Jake joins the woman in a shower. No threesome happens here, and they get a volcano snack to indicate that they'll have to hike up the top of a volcano, which Oscar does decide to join them on. Apparently, they have to sleep on an actual volcano and then continue hiking the next morning. The next clue is about putting on a radio show in Grenada, the next location, and it might be about sex. We do see Kelly and Jake cuddling up against one another romantically, so she's definitely cheating at this point. But she is bored of her boyfriend and wants to find herself. Anyways, the radio show did not go as well as they expected it to go, since there's a huge cultural clash. I couldn't find episode 12 at all because I had to search high and wide to find any season of Road Rules. I'm not going to dig even more because I could barely even find this. But I think there's a few episodes of the season that were mistitled since this happened one more time. But from what this also happened on the Extreme Challenge where there's one episode that's completely missing and no one can find it, but people still watch it. From the synopsis of the episode, it's the same relationship drama that Kaylee has had all season, and she has a she has a meltdown, and it seems like she does decide to go with him, Jake. Okay, so episode 13 is what I was referencing earlier, where there's a missing Puerto Rican episode where they didn't air it chronologically. So here's what it is. But they are giving their cards or the cards of the Real World Boston cast. So this season and the Real World Boston were filming at the exact same time. So they have to remember stuff about the Boston cast to compete with them. And it's interesting that this and Boston filmed at the same time, but a year ago, Road Rules Second Adventure and Miami filmed at the same time. So it seems like this will probably be a thing at least for the next few years. But every other Road Rule season. The Boston cast do fly to Puerto Rico, and both casts meet one another, and the Boston cast do see what the Road Rules cast wrote about them on their pictures, and they have to do a bunch of obstacles. Anyways, the Real Worlders do win the competition, and Cyrus has a nasty ass cut. So the Real World versus Road Rules event continued into this episode, and I wonder if this was the inspiration of the challenge Road Rules versus Real World in about a year or two, chronologically. But we do see both groups interacting with one another. Real World still wins overall, though Road Rules does catch up in the last two rounds. Oscar ranted about how you'll never give a woman a pedicure since the losers had to give the winners a pedicure, which causes uber feminist Montana to throw mud in his face, and they're having a go at it. Both casts go to the club with Cyrus getting stitches, and Chun initially fails to make a move on Erica, or that's how it appeared on the episodes, but a few people spelled that, especially San's roommates who got the narration this episode, spelled that he did hook up with Erica, who has a boyfriend. Okay, so this is the last episode that I had, but it wasn't the final episode. I do think there are some mislabeling issues, but I'm going to recap what I have anyways. So Callie is planning on moving to New York, where Jake lives, and they have to audition for a soap opera. Vance, Erica, and Oscar are chosen to be on camera, while Jake and Kelly are gophers for Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos, who they really get along with during the process. So it seems like I was missing the final episode, but from what I read on the synopsis from the wiki and just based on how the last three seasons have ended their seasons, they complete their final dinner, reflect on the time that they had over the 2.5 month journey, and they say their goodbyes to one another. Okay, so here are my very, very brief cast thoughts because I don't have many. Erica, she didn't really stand out. I do remember her having that argument with Oscar, and then she hooked up with Sean. It seemed like they're trying to make something of her and Vince come up, but it didn't really happen. Drake, he just had his showmance with Kelly. That was a huge storyline throughout the season, but I didn't really care much for it. Pretty much the same thing with Kelly, though she had a boyfriend, and there's a lot of familiar stuff that she was going through that we didn't get that dimension in the trailer, so I guess that was nice to see of her here. Oscar was definitely an outsider. I think a part of it came to him being Latino, though that's not a race, and culturally he was very different. He did have some interesting moments here, but compare him to others in his archetype, and he really doesn't stand out. And Vince, I don't really have many thoughts on him. He was very forgettable. And yeah, so overall, the season just did not work for me. It's not awful television, but it's very forgettable and unnotable television. And out of the 4 seasons, this is definitely the worst one. And I definitely see why a majority of the cast never did anything again, and the other two who did do something only did 1 season of the challenge. So I'm hoping that the next 2 seasons are better. Now I am covering the 5th season, which is Road Rules Northern Trial, and I know absolutely nothing that happens on the season. No moments, no references, absolutely nothing. Looking at the cast, all but one of them have done at least one challenge season. I think the only one who's done three are Ronnie and Dan, but neither one of them were the biggest personalities. So even from what they brought on the challenge, I don't know a whole lot about them. So I'm definitely entering this season very blind, which is actually a good thing. Hopefully it's better than the 4th season though. Okay, so I finally watched Northern Trial, and out of the seasons that I've watched thus far, it's okay. The cast is okay, competent, not the best, but not the worst. The drama was okay, there wasn't a whole lot of it. There definitely was a lot more storylines, I noticed that, so I feel like on the production end, they got more focused in that aspect. And this is also around the time where the franchise, I'm including Real World and Road Rules in this, is about to become a franchise, and they actually use this season to do a backdoor pilot of what would eventually become the challenge. And I also noticed it because looking at the cast, a few of them did a challenge season together. One was filmed like later on, or like a few months after this season was filmed, and then there's the battle of the seasons. So some of the interactions here are important to some of the challenge seasons, so I found that interesting. But overall, you could take or leave this season, really. Jake and Callie from last season, I don't know if they're still dating at this point, are kidnapping the cast who will be on the season in the order of Ronnie, who's literally at her high school prom, then Noah, then Annie, then Joe, who was in the middle of showering, then Tara, then Den, where they're all blindfolded. Anyways, they're all taken to Canada and take off their blindfolds to meet everyone in their cast. And their first task is bungee jumping. Hell no at the first task, where they have to get their first clue in the water. Their first task involves them driving to Seattle, where they are road racing, where they're competing against last season's cast. And I will say that I do like how Road Rules uses and utilizes their alumni, and only the fastest three would partake in the actual race. Tara wins the race for the season's cast, and Roni is driving for everyone, since she just got her license and only drove for 3 hours in her life at this point. They think the police is stopping them, but the person's really just as a police officer who gives them their clue where they're going to a club, and it's clear that Noah and Anne at this point kind of have a thing for one another, though this doesn't really last long into the season. Dan and Tara are talking about how they want to find their one person, and apparently they are interested in one another. Though Dan has a girlfriend. It is Noah's birthday, and Anne gives him a birthday present, but he doesn't like it, pissing her off, and it causes for them to argue, and they constantly have this back and forth. Dan and Tara spend all night talking to one another, so other people are starting to notice something between them growing. They are clubbing with the stars for the next task. Ronnie talks about the negative experience of golfing and black people, which I honestly didn't really know about. I have to do more research about that myself. But they get some actors, or they have to get some actors who are golfing to mention a specific word that they are assigned to. And clearly, some actors being on this meant that the show was getting huge at this point, which they do complete. They are still in Seattle and meet some sort of band where they are making a public service announcement for toe tagging prevention. Read between the lines what that is. Anne is feeling very off, where seemingly the subject is very close to home for her, as she cannot prevent her friend from toe tagging themselves, where the cast does comfort her about it. And I honestly relate to this very, very hard. And I talked about this in my last real world video. We see them create their public service announcement where it includes some pictures, and we have more Anne and Noah arguing with one another about the pictures and how they should be taken. And we do see them also make a video for the PSA too. Anne goes in a separate area to cry, and Noah does comfort her, so things are fine between them now. Of course, they end up completing the mission. Their next destination is in Calgary, where Anne and Nora are now a lot closer, where Dan and Tara are also getting a lot closer too. But the latter know that spending 10 weeks together is nothing compared to a 2 year relationship, or at least that's what Tara is telling other people. Turns out their van has somehow been raided, where their backpacks are gone and it is a mess. Ronnie's clothes are stolen and she's rightfully pissed off. Noah's guitar is stolen and more people are missing stuff. Noah apparently has a girlfriend where he and Anne do talk about their attraction for one another, though I think it's starting to fade around here. Their next task involves wrestling, and then they do it in sumo outfits. Noah and John are starting to not really get along at this point, but they end up in Regina, where they are a part of the RMCA and will be trained for the next few days. They are separated by gender, and the men have to shave as well. The two men start bickering since Noah continuously calls John weird and it's irritating him. Some of them are separating to do some sort of drills, or some drills to act off some of the jobs that some RCMP people actually do. We see the cast goofing around about sex and singing about it, but it is nice seeing them getting along at this point. They are going to North Dakota for the next mission, which is working on a 2 day cattle drive ride, so they're taking care of them pretty much. So they are riding horses to watch the cattle, and one ends up hopping over the fence to escape, where they're all arguing, trying to chase all the cows that end up escaping. And it's really funny as hell to watch, as they almost give up at first, and then they end up losing all of the cows. They and their horses are thirsty, sleeping in the cold, and things are just an utter disaster. So they show up to the powwow with no cows, which the Native Americans knew was going to happen, so they got them. The last few minutes of the episode is them learning the dances, customs, and celebrations of the people residing there. They are traveling to the next destination in Minneapolis, and Dan is worried because his girlfriend will want to spend all of their time together. So, because they're in Dan's hometown, they of course visit his home and meet his parents, his friends, and his girlfriend, who arrives later. Dan is freaking out because his girlfriend and Tara, I forgot that they're partners on Battle of the Season, so this is interesting lore for that. Being around one another worries him, and he decides to break up with his girlfriend. It's kind of brutal doing it on TV. Wisconsin is their next destination, and despite breaking up with his girlfriend, he spends the entire night with her. And Tara feels some type of way about it. For some reason, Sean from the real world, not even World Rules, but the real world, is hosting the lumberjacking competition, and Anne sprains her ankle, and she's flirting with him. I guess this was before World Rules All Stars film, and this will come to be true based on what happens later on in the season. Anyways, things are fine with Dan and Tara at this point. Anne has crutches and a wrap for her sprained ankle, and they're traveling to their next destination. But the sprained ankle is bothering her. John is trying to flirt with Anne because he is missing a woman's touch, and she shuts him down very quickly. Plattsville, Wisconsin is their next destination, where they have to do a Chicago Banks talent show. Tara and Anne talk about who they will speak to after the show, and it's clear that they're just not feeling John like that. We see the cast work at a Cinnabus factory where they have to pack a bunch of bubblegum. Anne meets a random guy at a sorority. It might be Noah's sorority, I'm not too sure about that. And she ends up getting some kisses from the guy. So Tara is starting to fall in love with Dan, and these are her words, and she's telling it to some of the other roommates. The next mission is to babysit pigs. Dan and Tara's relationship is getting very close, where she's still nervous due to never really being in a relationship beforehand. So they were at Noah's home for the last episode, and now they are at Chicago while having the pigs, traveling with the pigs in the van. Most hotels are not going to allow pigs to stay in the hotel with them, so they have to pretty much sneak the pigs in. Anyways, Dan and Tara are full blown making out on beaches, so they're an essential couple at this point. They accomplish the task of delivering the pigs to their destination. So they're at Detroit, and their next task is at a hospital, and they're doing the typical tasks that are done at hospitals. We see a few members of the cast getting squeamish and nervous. There was a warning in the beginning of the episode for the viewers regarding this. One of the patients they were dealing with actually ended up dying, and it definitely scarred the cast. We see them go to a party, and Anne is getting relatively close to another guy. So Anne is still seeing the same guy she met a week ago, and they have to do a go-go dance for a task. Ronnie is a performing arts student, and she's a professional dancer. So she is choreographing it for everyone, and she's taking it seriously. But there's definitely some tension since the rest aren't good dancers, and she's very strict with her business. They are in Toronto for the festival, and it bothers her how horribly they are dancing. Anne is glad that her boo is able to make it to Toronto, and the cast do go to the club for the night. So they do end up performing, and Noah is flirting with a bunch of women despite having a girlfriend and is trying to fight the temptation. So he calls his girlfriend to kind of soft launch a breakup. The roommates are losing more and more respect and getting annoyed with Noah, which I find to be very ironic coming from Dan of all people, since he essentially had an emotional affair and broke up with his girlfriend to get with Tara on television. Anyways, they are playing a hockey game for the next task, playing against children hockey players. Noah ends up having a girl in Montreal, and they are getting really frisky by the end of the episode. They are going to New York for their next destination, which is where Ronnie lives. So, of course, she's very excited. And they do meet Ronnie's mother. It's just the two of them who live together. And, of course, her mother meets the cast, essentially. So, we see them working at a photo place where they're in a red room. So, it's that type of photo place for the task. And Ronnie's mother is leading the mission. So, I'm assuming that Ronnie's mother's workplace. And they're printing pictures of their moments throughout the season. They are told that their next task is to answer 30 questions, but this won't come into play for like another two episodes. And Ronnie wanted everyone to come to her dance troupe to meet her loved ones, which is something she discussed all season. And only Noah goes, and the rest kind of blows it off to make their photo gallery. That pisses her off, and the others feel like the two of them bailed while them working on the photo book. Noah and Ronnie paged them all day to get them to come out, and the others essentially ignored it, so the two of them were blown off. Ronnie thinks that Anne, Dan, and Tara especially are fake, since they pretend to want to get to know people and are full of it. Ronnie decides to confront them about what happened in New York when they're on the van to the next destination and how they all blew her off, while the others, mainly Anne and Tara, are defending themselves, claiming that they pretty much Ronnie just decided to leave and they felt like she was very disconnected from them in New York. And Ronnie's crying because she is so like upset. It's like an upset cry, not like I'm sad, I'm depressed cry. So Ronnie clearly feels like they never tried to get to know her, and Anne mentions that Ronnie seems like she's babysitting them, where Ronnie's pretty much has the mindset of where she's done with the cast, where Dan and Tara do apologize. We don't see Anne doing it, but we do see her feeling bad for Ronnie crying, but they all agree to let it go and to move on. So the penultimate episode of the season is essentially a backdoor pilot to what would eventually become the challenge. And I say eventually because the first season, Road Rules All Stars, was technically not a part of the challenge when it was filmed, and for some years after words, it was retroactively added to the challenge canon. But pretty much, they see the cast of Road Rules All Stars meeting with them. Anne can't be with them due to a sprained ankle, so she is at the hospital. Essentially, they are competing against the Road Rules All Stars cast in a bunch of tasks. We have Rachel talking to John about how she's crushing on Eric, who has a better body, in her words, and Sean, who is smarter, in her words, who ends up being her husband. Both tasks compete in a roller. Sorry, both groups compete in a roller skating competition, and they end up kayaking too. I'm wondering if this episode inspired Real World versus Road Rules, as that would be that at the time first and retroactively the second challenge season, which filmed, uh, I think, yeah, the year after this, and that would be the main format of the show, where three of this cast end up being on that season. The two casts continue to battle against one another as they are now doing ice skating and then dancing at a club for a task. The two casts say goodbye to one another, where the Road Rules cast goes to a cabin for the final mission, which is the 30 questions that they were given 2 episodes ago. Or that was the task that they were told about 2 episodes ago. Turns out that a decent amount of the questions are messy, where Dad and Tara get a lot of them since it's about their relationship, but many of them are peaceful and fun as well. Their final task is at an amusement park, and they have golf carts to cruise around the park. After climbing a mountain and a path, they go to a box where they get their rewards and they say goodbye to one another as the season is done. Okay, so I'm going to generally talk about the cast very briefly. Anne was low key kind of the breakout star of the season. She was the one who got into the most drama. She had several hiccups throughout the season. She had a lot of the more memorable moments of the season. So I definitely do see why she did a few challenge seasons after this. Then we got a lot more of. He essentially cheated on his girlfriend, and with Tara, I kind of get why they ended up being paired together in Battle of the Seasons. But as a personality, he's still very, very boring, actively non confrontational, and doesn't really like to express his feelings. So, John, I didn't have much thought on. I'm starting to notice that a lot of these quote unquote people of color, men that have been on the last few World War seasons, they don't do anything else and they don't end up on the challenge. I don't know if there's production bias there or they really just were not delivering, but I feel like out of all the men in the archetype, John is arguably the most boring thus far, and he was kind of weird with his crush on Anne. Uh, no, I think he had a bit more personality than Dan, but essentially it's the same thing. He kind of had a flirtment with Anne going on, but then that ended. We didn't even know he had a girlfriend until mid-season, but then he soft launches to break up with her, then starts hooking up with some random people. He was only on one challenge season, and he wasn't that memorable there, if I remember correctly. So, Roni, they did talk about how she was very quiet, but we did learn a lot more about Tahir with her dancing history and some of the family. And she did get a bit confrontational during the end, which I was not expecting from Roni of all people since she was so quiet and demure. And I think out of all of them, she has the lengthiest reality TV career, where she did 3 challenge seasons, and her last one was recently. So I guess you could see her grow up throughout the decades with her spotty appearances. And then Tara, I didn't remember her a whole lot on the Battle of the Seasons, but I do know she and Dan made it to the end. And understanding the lore here due to them really falling for one another during this season, which led to them being partnered up for a Battle of the Seasons, was something to take note of, even though she herself wasn't really interesting to me. So, in conclusion, Northern Trial was an okay season. I did like the fact that they traveled from the West Coast to the East Coast regarding the US Canada border. I liked the different locations. The cast kind of held their own. They weren't completely boring, but they weren't completely interesting either. They weren't complete nuts like there were on some of the other seasons, but they weren't as electric as some of the other casts. Anyways, they're still pushing 2 seasons a year because Road Rules is successful. But you'll start to see the shift where after this, Road Rules becomes a casting feel point for the challenge. So Most likely, some people got on road rules so they could be on the challenge, and they know by now that this is an avenue where they can extend their reality TV careers. Where people in the earlier seasons, they went on and did their season, expecting it to be the only one. So, yeah, right now it's in the middle of my rankings of the 5 seasons. We'll see how it holds up with the addition of the future seasons. Okay, so now we're on season 6, which is Road Rules Down Under. I know nothing about the season entering it because I haven't watched Road Rules at all before this rewatch. What I do know is that because I just finished watching The Real World Seattle by the time I'm recording this, I do know that the people cast for Road Rules Down Under were Real World Seattle rejects, and this tends to happen where I believe Real World Miami and the second season of Road Rules, so Road Rules US Adventure, they were cast at the same time. Real World, Boston, and Road Rules the Island, they were cast at the same time, and then now it's the same thing here, which is why you kind of see cameos between the dual seasons from the shows. So that's what I do know. I do recognize all but one of them from the challenge. Some of them did quite a few seasons, so that was very, very interesting. So Brownman, Kefla, and Susie, they did a few seasons. And Chadwick, even though he's a one-season wonder, he was very memorable from his season. So I have a very good enough idea regarding the people on here, though. When I'm outside the battle of the seasons, I'm looking at the cast, and they really weren't cast on the challenge together. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this. And it's interesting that the route for this season is Oceania. So I'm interested seeing the how that will look like. Okay, so I just finished watching the season, and I think I have a favorite out of the 6. I think the cast worked really, really well together. I think there's only really one dud here. The location or the route of the season is very interesting, though it was mainly just Hawaii and Australia, and most of it was in Australia. The missions were very interesting. I liked how they implemented the other alumni, and you definitely feel that the show was at its stride at this point. And this was right around the time where the challenge was officiated, too. So this is kind of like the start of the show's peak, in my opinion. Or we're getting there. I'm excited, and I just thought it was very enjoyable. There was drama, but it wasn't too much. The missions were interesting and I think just kind of vibed well together. And I'm definitely starting to see how the show is evolving. We see the cast getting calls about making it onto the season. I believe all but Shane and Peggy were Real World Seattle rejects, but they are individually flying to Honolulu and they have their greetings with one another. Dan and Tara from last season are the ones to introduce them, so I'm assuming they're still dating, and take their belongings, where their first mission is taking a high jump, 25 feet exactly into the water, then jump 35 feet to get more money, and then all but Susie and Kefla decide to jump 45 feet to get the most money. They complete the mission and go to the beach, where Susie is already complaining. On the beach, they have buried treasure, or in the beach, my bad, they have buried treasure, where they have a metal detector to find it. After getting their passports, they are flying to Sydney, Australia, and we see Christina and Peggy bonding. Sorry, I think it's Christina and Susie bonding already, if I'm remembering correctly. They arrive in Australia to go to a concert and meet the band, or a band, I don't really care to know their names at the moment, where they get another clue, which is about going to a gay parade, Mardi Gras. I thought this was just a New Orleans, USA thing with Mardi Gras at Stonewall. So we have Piggy and Susie talking about religion, since Susie is a southern girl who doesn't believe in homosexuality, but doesn't think that they should be treated poorly about it. This is actually pretty interesting based on who her BFF is nowadays, and yes, I am referring to Sarah Rice. Essentially, they have to dress like the other gender, and Chadwick feels a bit uncomfortable. Pretty much the cast is starting to get annoyed with Chadwick because he is sanctimonious, who thinks he's better than everyone, where Piggy and Chadwick immediately clash, since he senses that she doesn't like him at all and he wants no beef. They separate, then he approaches her again to talk, where she clearly is not in the mood to, and she verbalizes this, but this ends up pissing her off even more. Chadwick then decides to grab a guitar and follow her around. I would be so annoyed if I were her. Of course, they complete their mission. The driving lanes and seats are the complete opposite in Australia, but they finally get their truck, and we see a few of them get their Australia license. And their mission is to feel comfortable driving the Australian way, essentially. So, this is like the third mission, kind of, and they all have to do this individually. So, Susie has a boyfriend, but she has a crush on a Shane, and it's definitely reciprocal, but this doesn't really go anywhere in the season. Anyways, they go to a zoo to deal with the snakes, avoiding them biting them, of course, and a bunch of animals as well. Peggy is not getting along with the cast and she feels left out, while others see her as too overdramatic and sensitive. Christina is sick and is claiming that Shane gave it to her, if I'm remembering this correctly, and their next mission involves fire, which Kifla is not fond of since he got a third degree burn from a fire in the past, where they're essentially firefighters. With this comes a bunch of the drills that are associated with the job, and it culminates in them saving people, quote unquote, from a burning building. Of course, they complete the mission. Chadwick gets a letter from his ex, who he separated with, and I guess he just thought it was a break, but she's dating other people, so she essentially breaks up with him. Brisbane is their next location, and their next task involves them working at a restaurant. I'm noticing that there's more focus on individuals winning missions this season compared to the past seasons, and buying ingredients for it. So the restaurant they're working at is actually a fast food truck. Christian and Timmy from season 2 comes out, and Susie has a huge crush on Timmy, and she admits that she's borderline a stalker when it comes to Timmy. So they have a roller skate to place the products in the truck without spilling it, and it's a mess. And I also think it's ironic because I think Susie and Timmy do a few challenge seasons together. Anyways, then they have to cook in the food trucks while the others are driving. This is very dangerous. No one should actually do this. Anyways, Piggy and Chad are getting closer at the end of the episode, and I do get why they end up being partners on Battle of the Seasons. Their next task involves aliens somehow, but it's really a news reporter place. The aliens they saw were in a newspaper, so they have to create a story about aliens essentially. We see them do all their research and interview people about it. More and more people are getting annoyed with Piggy, and they're discussing whether they should confront her or not. Chadwick actually tells her what people have been saying about her behind her back as a good friend, and they also argued this morning about her making fun of him for not knowing certain words, so it's really just not a good situation all around. We see the cast looking at dolphins and stuff where Picky is isolating herself yet again. She and Susie do speak about it, but it doesn't really go anywhere since she doesn't want to fix her mood and doesn't want to speak about it to the others. They are now on the beach and have to pretend to drown so CPR can be done on them where they gain money. We have more of Christina and Cece complaining about Picky, and then we move on to Picky and Christina calling one another a bunch of bitches, though she is aware that she is sensitive. They do agree to make up and to enjoy this experience that since no one else will experience what they are experiencing. Chadwick tells or teaches Picky how to drive stick and in Australia where she does pest. I do think a lot of the conflict is cultural, especially because she's the only British person and I believe the rest of them are American. Or everyone but Shane is American, but even Canada, the country is very similar to America compared to the UK. Okay, so I was not expecting an episode like this on road rules. It's very heavy. It's like a real world episode with the content in it, which shocked me. They go to a concert for a band, and Keith feels off since he's the only black person around five other white people. And it's interesting how Piggy identifies as white. We're going to break this down a little bit later. He is on the phone with a friend and mentions that Piggy's mother is half black, meaning that her mother is biracial, and meaning that Piggy is three-quarters white. I have another word to use, but people get offended with that word, so I'm not going to say it here. So, he also talks about her curly hair, and Piggy herself is in a confessional, mentioning that she takes the white advantages while rejecting the black disadvantages, especially since she grew up all around white people. Chadwick mentions that it's So small of Kifla to see things as quote unquote black and white. Like Kifla has a choice, and I do think that it shows Chadwick's um not Eric kind of arrogance but ignorance, and we're gonna get and he shows that a few times in this episode. They have to deal with native Australians at a reservation, and they're comparing them to black people, which I don't really know how to feel about that. We then see the white roommates combing and talking about Piggy's hair. They touch her hair, and Kifla is becoming more and more withdrawn from everyone. I think Roni dealt with this last season, and it's interesting that I compared her here before I even saw one of the later episodes. We're gonna get there. There is a conversation about how white people are mansplaining it, and the mission is about essentially teaching the native Australian children. Kefla is very passionate about it since he is a teacher, and this passion is coming off as too strong to people. And Chadwick is the only one saying something about this, and they kind of go back and forth about it. And he's not scared of Chadwick being black. I don't know how to feel about this, and this is kind of another example of what I was referring to with Chadwick earlier in the episode. They feel bad about the reserves, and Kiefer mentions that the US is similar, but they like to hide it. We do see them talk about the kids, and Kiefer is the most comfortable dealing with the kids and relating to them. He is going to be a teacher, essentially. And I do think by All Stars, he does become a teacher. So, yeah. So the cast is bowling, and there's a lot of talk about Susie being a lot less superficial and more of an open person. Sorry, I have to bring something in the last episode. Piggy and others keep on referencing her mixed mother as black, so they kind of go back and forth about that, and it just shows how convenient certain things are. But if you're mixed race, you're not black. Sorry, not sorry. Anyways, she steals bowling shoes, I'm referring to Susie now, to wear for all the missions, and her tips are tied pink. The next mission involves crocodiles, and they have to break the eggshells to release and catch the baby crocodiles. We see them grab, I don't know if they're toddler crocodiles, child crocodiles, or teen crocodiles, but they're definitely bigger than the baby crocodiles they were dealing with earlier in the episode. We see them handle a huge ass crocodile, and it's literally all of them pulling on ropes to get this crocodile. The episode ends with Susie getting a tattoo as she is becoming more grown up and wants to do more things outside of her bubble. The women ditch the guys to drive the truck and they crash the car, so they call her to get the insurance covered, but the woman wants nothing to do with it. So they're at a haunted hotel for the next mission. I told some scary story about the woman who toe tagged herself there, essentially, and some of them, or passed away there, and some of them want to stay in the room for the night. The ones who decide to stay in the room, and I don't remember who exactly, I don't care to, like, point it out, to be honest, end up recording everything, and Piggy gets enough money for the woman whose car she crashed for insurance, which I thought was nice. So we are seeing them say goodbye to their van since they don't really need it anymore, and their next mission involves them playing rugby. The other team consists of Road Rule alumni, so Oscar from season 4, Ronnie from season 5, Blue from season 3, Chris from season 3, and Emily from season 2, and Dan from season 5. Kefla has a crush on Ronnie, and we actually do see them talking about being the only black people on their seasons and relating to one another. Oscar and Christina are flirting with one another pretty hard, and and Susie is flirting with the host, who is also a professional rugby player. After we see the two groups start bonding with one another, they do start playing the game. So most of the game actually takes place in this episode, where the Road Rules alum end up winning, with Dan being the MVP. That doesn't mean that it's the end, though, since the alumni come to the house that season 6 is staying at, and there's a lot of conversing as well as fun taking place. And I do think this is kind of the start of the alumni really heavily mixing in with the current cast, and I feel like this is where they start using almost as a storyline, kind of. So we see Christina and Oscar continue to get too close. The two groups do say goodbye to one another the next morning. Susie calls the coach she was flirting with, and he does end up calling her back. He invites them to his house, probably because of the cameras and the TV exposure, and they all eat there. Susie does end up getting a kiss out of the guy, but that's all there is to that. It is the season finale. The women are sad that the journey is over, while the men are kind of apathetic, especially Kefla. But they realize that it is personal as race comes up again. There is the Last Supper that they are having the next evening, and it's awkward because Kefla has no feelings about it, and he mentions that there's no place like home. So they go back to the hotel, and Christina decides to confront him since she bit her tongue the entire season and was protecting him. But pretty much he tells her that he can't pull teals that doesn't exist or he doesn't have, and she mentions that there should be common ground after spending 2 months with people, but he's starting to see a point of view where she wants him to enjoy the last few days of the experience and to enjoy the experience for what it is, as he needs to show himself to more people. And that kind of happened for the rest of the episode. It is time for the last mission, which is skydiving, and of course they do this. Chadwick and Piggy leave the season being good friends, and they all get their motorcycles as a reward for the season. Okay, so here are my brief thoughts on the cast. Chadwick's definitely arrogant and kind of annoying, but it's a way that it definitely makes for good TV. So I wasn't shocked at all at how he was on this season, which kind of carried over into his brief run on the challenge, which is still very memorable. Christina was definitely a lot more interesting here than she was on a Battle of the Sexes. I really wasn't expecting her to be so vocal, but it showed a different side of her that wasn't executed on Battle of the Sexes. Keith Love was very interesting. Obviously, he was the only black man on the season, and you could tell by this point, Road Rules and the Real World likes to cast into archetypes either the boring, quote unquote, mixed or a black person, or the very belligerent, aggressive one. And he didn't really fit either. He kind of kept to himself, but he had his interesting moments, and he was kind of a medium between them. So I think he was one of the best examples of a black man on the show or on the franchise. I'm including Real World at this point. Piggy was definitely entertaining. I was definitely expecting that from what I remember of her on the challenge. She was definitely less aggressive and more emotional in a good way, though she was still very annoying a lot of the time too. Shane, I have absolutely no thoughts on. He was very forgettable. He got lost in the sauce amongst the cast, and I'm not shocked he's the only one on this cast who has never done the challenge. Susie, she didn't irritate me like she did on the challenge, but I think it's because she was very young and naive here. She was still finding herself. And then when she inevitably found herself on the challenge and in adulthood, she became more bitchier. So I guess there's that. She was definitely getting into a few hookups and she was playing with a lot of people throughout the season. So there's that. Okay, so that's my thoughts on season six, Road Rules Down Under. I really did like it. I could definitely see the show hitting its stride around this point. They're still pumping out two shows a season, so it's definitely a huge success. But I do think at this point they realized that they need to change it up a bit, especially with how reality TV was starting to change and they were starting to recognize what they can do when it comes to their crossover potential and just from their other shows. So overall, I'm definitely enjoying this so far. Hopefully, the momentum continues. Okay, so I'm 6 seasons deep and there's 14 seasons overall. So I'm roughly around 40% complete when it comes to watching Road Rules. So I'm almost halfway there. It is interesting because at this point, the challenge was about to become a thing and the Road Rules will be. Well, this will be the first opportunity they can be to be cast on the challenge with the Real World versus Road Rules, filming in 1998 and airing in 99. So this would be the first chance that they really get to cross over into another show and to extend their reality TV careers. So I am interested in seeing how the next few seasons will come off the backs of that and how the casting will reflect that, where most of them are probably joining the show now so they could be on the challenge. I do know that they changed the format eventually with Road Rules so it can be a bit more competitive. So I am interested in watching that shift. So I am going to do season 10 to 12 in one bulk. Sorry, season 7 to 9 in the next bulk. So that will be the third video. Then season 10 to 12 will be the next video after that. And then the final two seasons, season 13 and season 14, will be their own separate video. So essentially, we have 3 more videos like this to pump out there. And yeah, I'm definitely interested in the show. The fourth and fifth seasons weren't the greatest, and things started kicking up during the sixth season, and I hope the momentum continues here. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!